In the deep, quiet reaches of space, the stars twinkled like diamonds scattered across a dark, endless blanket. The vastness of space was peaceful, almost serene, but the silence was deceiving. There was a storm brewing, one that no one could yet see. It had been a long time since humanity had known peace. The battles, the wars, the betrayals, all of it had left scars across the galaxy. And now, the time had come to right those wrongs. On a lone human ship, drifting through the emptiness of space, the crew felt the weight of what was to come. It was a small vessel, but it carried the hopes and dreams of all of humanity. The crew, a mix of veterans and rookies, had been chosen for this mission because they had one thing in common. They were the last line of defense. Humanity had been underestimated before, and now, they were preparing to show their enemies just what they were capable of. Captain Aria Donovan stood at the bridge, her sharp eyes focused on the viewscreen. Her hands were steady, though inside, she could feel the storm of emotions swirling. They had been waiting for this moment for years, and now it was finally here. The traitors, the ones who had once been allies, had betrayed humanity, leaving them to suffer in the shadows of the galaxy. But the tables were about to turn. Humanity's fury was about to be unleashed, and there would be no mercy. Beside her, Commander Blake Carter, a seasoned officer with a reputation for his tactical genius, stared out at the stars. His mind raced, running through every possible outcome, every strategy. He had been through countless battles, but this one felt different. This wasn't just about winning a war. This was about vengeance. This was personal. The galaxy had watched, as humanity struggled, underestimated them at every turn. But they had made a mistake. Now, humanity would make them remember. Captain Carter said, his voice low and steady. Are we really ready for this? Aria didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out at the stars, her thoughts drifting to all the people they had lost, all the lives that had been sacrificed. We have to be, she said finally. We don't have a choice anymore. There was a quiet moment between them, as if the weight of their mission hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. This wasn't just another battle. This was a war for redemption. For too long, humanity had been the underdog, the one ignored, overlooked, and mocked. But that was about to change. The ship's engines hummed softly as the crew prepared for what lay ahead. Each person on the ship had a role to play, and they knew that failure wasn't an option. They had trained for years, prepared for every possible scenario, but this was different. The traitors had thought they could destroy humanity with their power and their alliances, but they didn't understand the one thing that made humans dangerous: resilience. Humanity had a heart that couldn't be broken, and now that heart was ready to strike back. As the ship moved further into enemy space, the tension grew. It was as if the very air around them was charged with electricity, and every creak of the ship, every flicker of the lights, made the crew feel like they were on the edge of something big, something that could change everything. And they were, right? The galaxy would never be the same again. Incoming transmission, the communications officer said, breaking the silence. It's from the Alliance. The crew all turned their attention to the screen as the image of an alien commander appeared. His green skin shimmered under the light, and his sharp eyes fixed on them. You've made a mistake, Captain, he said, his voice full of smug confidence. You cannot win this war. You will be crushed, just like all the others before you, Captain. Donovan's eyes narrowed. She had heard this before. Over and over again, humanity had been told they were weak, that they didn't stand a chance. But now, those words didn't carry the same weight they once did. Now, they only fueled her fire. Crushed, she replied coldly, her voice firm. We're the ones who've been crushed for too long. Now, it's your turn. The transmission cut off, leaving behind only the silence of space. The crew exchanged looks, each one of them feeling the weight of the captain's words. This wasn't just about winning. It was about making a statement. It was about humanity proving once and for all that they would not be forgotten. The ship continued its journey deeper into enemy territory. Each passing moment brought them closer to their goal. Soon they would confront those who had betrayed them, and when they did, there would be no escape. The traitors had made a grave mistake, and now they would pay the price. As the stars blurred by, the crew's resolve hardened. They knew what they were fighting for. They weren't just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for everyone who had suffered under the weight of betrayal. They were fighting to show the galaxy that humanity was no longer the underdog, but a force to be reckoned with. Captain Donovan's voice echoed over the intercom, breaking the silence once more. Prepare yourselves, she said. This is only the beginning. The human ship drifted deeper into enemy territory, the once distant threat now closing in with terrifying speed. Inside the ship, The atmosphere was thick with tension, every crew member acutely aware of the risks. The quiet hum of the engines seemed to reverberate through the hull, amplifying the feeling of anticipation. Outside, space stretched endlessly, a vast, indifferent void, but inside the ship, the stakes had never been higher. Captain Donovan stood at the bridge, her eyes locked onto the dark expanse ahead. She had seen many battles in her time, but this one felt different. The weight of the mission was heavy on her shoulders, and she knew the future of humanity depended on their success. They had no allies here, only the strength of their resolve. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long, but the tide was turning, and they would not be silenced. Captain Carter's voice broke through her thoughts, bringing her back to the present. He was standing next to the tactical console, his face drawn with concentration. We're getting closer to the traitor fleet. The perimeter scans are showing their flagship just ahead. It's a massive ship, heavily armed. They're not expecting us to get this far. Donovan's lips tightened as she processed the information. She had expected nothing less. The traitors were confident in their strength, but they had failed to account for one thing: humanity's will to survive. They had been pushed to the brink, but now they were back with a vengeance. We'll take them by surprise, Donovan said, her voice firm. Prepare the fleet for immediate action. We hit hard, fast, and then we get out before they can regroup. Carter nodded, tapping commands into the console. The crew began to spring into action, preparing their weapons and systems. Every man and woman on board knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another mission. This was a reckoning. The traitors who had turned their backs on humanity would soon realize the price of their betrayal. That as the crew continued their preparations, the tension in the air became palpable. Donovan stood tall, her expression unyielding, but even she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her guts. She had seen war, had seen the devastation it brought, but this was different. The traitors had not only wronged humanity, they had doomed themselves. They had underestimated the strength of a people who had nothing left to lose, and now they would pay. The ship's sensors pinged, pulling her attention back to the matter at hand. The enemy fleet was in sight, its size almost overwhelming. Massive warships loomed in the darkness, their engines burning bright, while smaller fighters darted in and out, patrolling the area. The flagship, a colossal behemoth of dark metal and glowing lights, sat at the center, surrounded by an armada of ships. It was clear they were prepared for battle, but they had not expected humanity to be so bold. Time to show them what humanity is capable of, Donovan muttered to herself, steeling herself for the challenge ahead. As they closed the distance, the enemy fleet activated its defenses, shields glowing to life, weapons powering up. The air was thick with anticipation, every member of the crew holding their breath as they waited for the order to strike. The tension was so thick it almost felt suffocating. Fire when ready, Donovan said, her voice calm, despite the storm raging in her mind. The crew sprang into action, unleashing their first salvo of weapons on the enemy fleet. Explosions erupted in the cold vacuum of space, bright flashes lighting up the dark expanse as the first wave of fire hit the traitor ships. The enemy reacted quickly, their ships beginning to return fire, but it was too late. Humanity had caught them off guard. The first strike had created chaos, throwing the enemy fleet into disarray. The humans pressed their advantage, their ships moving with precision, expertly avoiding enemy fire as they tore through the traitor ranks. As the battle raged, Donovan couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. This was what they had been waiting for. The traitors had assumed they could get away with their betrayal, that humanity would stay broken and weak, but they had forgotten the one thing that could never be taken from the human race: their will to fight back. Traitor fleet was in chaos now. Ships were drifting, their systems disabled by the onslaught. Explosions lit up the void, debris spinning in all directions. But the humans weren't finished yet. They had come for justice, and they wouldn't stop until it was done. Captain, we're pushing them back, Carter said, his voice tinged with excitement. The fleet is in disarray. We're causing massive damage to their ships. Donovan nodded, her eyes narrowing. They were winning the battle, but she knew this was only the beginning. There was still the flagship, the heart of the traitor fleet, and it was far from defeated. Focus all fire on the flagship, she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. Take it down, and the rest of the fleet will fall. The crew moved with deadly precision, their aim true as they directed everything they had toward the massive warship. Weapons fire tore through the flagship's shields, sending ripples of light across its surface. The enemy retaliated with everything they had, but it was clear that they were losing control. Donovan's eyes locked on the viewscreen as the flagship began to shake. Its engines sputtering and shields flickering, they were getting closer. The traitors had underestimated humanity, and now, they were paying the price. The fight was far from over, but the tide was turning in their favor. "We're not done yet," Donovan said softly, a fierce determination in her eyes. "We'll see this through to the end." With one final, decisive blow, the flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, marking the end of the traitor fleet's reign. The crew erupted in cheers, but Donovan remained stoic. This victory was only the first step. There was much more to come, and humanity would not stop until every traitor had been brought to justice. As the crew celebrated their victory, Donovan turned her gaze toward the endless stars. The galaxy had been watching, but now, humanity's story was being written. And this time, the galaxy would remember their name. The aftermath of the battle left the black void of space, scattered with debris and the remains of shattered warships. The hum of the ship's engines filled the silence, a sound that now seemed reassuring, as though it were a reminder that humanity was still moving forward. Captain Donovan stood at the bridge, her gaze fixed on the stars. The victory had been hard won, but it was only the first step. The traitors had been thrown into chaos, but their flagship was only one part of a much larger enemy force. The war was far from over, and humanity had made its mark, but now came the real test. Would the galaxy remember the power they'd unleashed? As the crew processed the aftermath of the battle, the ship's sensors began to pick up strange readings. Something wasn't right. The enemy fleet might have been in disarray, but it wasn't defeated. It was reorganizing, regrouping. The traitors weren't finished yet, and they were coming back stronger than before. "Captain, we've detected reinforcements." Carter's voice came through, tense with urgency. "A new fleet has arrived. It's huge. They're calling in backup, and they've brought in some serious firepower." Donovan's heart tightened. She had known the traitors wouldn't go down without a fight, but they were regrouping faster than expected. Humanity's initial success had only pushed them into a corner, and when you back a wolf into a corner, it doesn't hesitate to bite back. "Get us ready for the next wave," she ordered, her voice sharp and commanding. "Prepare all weapons and shields. We're not backing down now." The crew moved with swift precision, activating weapons and preparing for the next wave of conflict. Each person on board understood the weight of the mission. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge, for justice, for a galaxy that had wronged them, and they weren't going to let the traitors get away with it. As the ship sailed through the void, closer and closer to the incoming reinforcements, the tension began to rise once again. The calm after the first victory had been short-lived, and now, the true scale of the war was beginning to unfold. The human fleet had only one chance to take down the traitors, but it was becoming clear that this battle would not be as easy as the last. Then, without warning, the enemy fleet appeared. Massive warships with flashing lights and dark holes filled the screen. It was a fleet unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The traitors had brought in their heavy hitters, and they were ready to make their mark. Donovan's eyes narrowed as she watched the enemy ships grow larger on the screen. She knew this battle would be different. They had caught the traitors off guard once, but now, they had regrouped, and they were ready. The fight would be harder, fiercer, and the stakes higher. "All hands, brace for impact," she called, her voice calm despite the storm brewing inside. "This isn't just about us anymore. This is about proving humanity's strength to the entire galaxy. And we're not backing down." The first shots were fired as the two fleets collided in space, the deafening sound of the impacts ringing through the ship's hull. Even though the vacuum of space was silent, laser beams tore through the void, cutting through enemy shields. With surgical precision, humanity's ships moved with agility, their smaller size allowing them to weave in and out of enemy fire, striking fast and hard. But the enemy wasn't going down easily. Their warships were massive, and their firepower was overwhelming. Humanity was taking hits, but they were holding their ground. Captain Donovan watched as her crew fought back with every ounce of strength they had. The traitors may have had numbers, but humanity had something far more powerful. With each blast, with each hit to the enemy fleet, the crew's determination grew stronger. They couldn't let the traitors win, not after all they had been through. They couldn't let the galaxy forget them again. "We need to take out their flagship," Carter said, his voice urgent. "It's the heart of their fleet. If we don't take it down, we won't survive this fight." Donovan nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. The flagship was massive, but it wasn't invincible. The humans had the advantage of speed and precision. If they could hit it at the right moment, they could take it down, and once that was done, the rest of the fleet would fall apart. "Focus all fire on the flagship," she ordered, her voice resolute. "This is our chance. We take it down now, and the rest of the fleet will follow." The crew moved in unison, locking their sights on the enemy flagship. They fired relentlessly, the energy from their weapons crackling as they hit the massive ship's shields. The flagship retaliated with powerful bursts of fire, but the human fleet didn't waver. They kept pushing forward, unrelenting, as their weapons continued to hammer away at the Traitors' flagship. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the flagship's shields began to flicker. A small crack appeared, and humanity saw their chance. With a final, concentrated blast, the shields collapsed, and the ship was exposed. The crew watched in silence as the flagship began to break apart, its engines sputtering and its hull exploding in a shower of sparks and debris. But there was no time to celebrate. The remaining traitor ships were still firing, and the war was far from over. As the flagship exploded, Donovan felt a surge of pride. This was humanity's moment, but they couldn't stop now. They had to finish what they had started. "One down," she muttered, eyes locked on the remaining enemy ships. "Now let's finish this." The battle raged on, but the humans had taken a critical first step. They had shown the traitors what they were made of, and in that moment, humanity knew that they were no longer just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would never forget it. The fight in space raged on, and despite the victory of taking down the traitors' flagship, the battle was far from won. The enemy, battered and reeling from their loss, began to reorganize in an attempt to regain control. Their reinforcements were vast, but humanity's spirit was unbreakable. Every crew member aboard the human ships knew that the path to victory was steep, but they were prepared for whatever lay ahead. Captain Donovan stood firm, her eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield. The space around them had become a field of fire and debris, the once perfectly serene void of space now torn apart by the violence of war. Explosions lit up the darkness, and flashes of energy beams crisscrossed the black canvas. Humanity had struck hard, but the enemy was determined to fight back, and they were beginning to regroup. Their anger fueled them, just as humanity's thirst for revenge had done. "Captain, they're not backing down." Carter's voice came from behind her, laced with both urgency and disbelief. "They're regrouping faster than we anticipated. Their ships are reorganizing into battle formation. It's like they're coming for us all at once." Donovan turned to face her second in command. Her face hardened with determination. She had expected the enemy to fight back, but this level of aggression was something else. These traitors weren't just angry, they were desperate. Desperation was always dangerous, but so was human resolve. "Let them come," Donovan replied, her voice as cold and sharp as the steel of the ships around them. "We've shown them mercy. Now we show them what happens when they make humanity an enemy." The crew moved swiftly, working as one unit with seamless precision. They had trained for every scenario, and this moment was no different. They were prepared to go down fighting, but Captain Donovan knew that wouldn't be necessary. Humanity wasn't just going to survive this battle, they were going to win it, no matter the cost. "Prepare the fleet for a full assault," Donovan ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. "We take the fight to them, hard and fast." The enemy had gathered into a large cluster of warships, clearly attempting to overpower humanity's forces through sheer numbers. But the human fleet was nimble and agile, and they knew exactly how to use their speed to their advantage. The crew's fingers hovered over their controls as weapons powered up, shields were reinforced, and the ships prepared for a final push. They had one goal: to decimate the traitor fleet and leave nothing but destruction in their wake. The first shots rang out like a thunderclap. The enemy fleet unleashed a barrage of fire, but the human ships were already moving, weaving through the incoming blasts. Humanity had learned the hard way how to fight in the darkness of space, how to maneuver their ships with a precision that made them almost impossible to hit. The traitors, relying on brute force, couldn't keep up. They were slow and cumbersome, compared to the sleek, agile human vessels. "Focus fire on their command ship," Donovan barked as she watched the enemy's weak points appear. She knew that breaking their command structure would throw the rest of the fleet into chaos. The human ships moved in perfect harmony, converging on the heart of the traitor formation. Their weapons fired in rapid succession, tearing through shields and armor with a deadly precision. The traitors fired back, but their weapons couldn't match the speed and skill of the humans. The flagship, though no longer the most powerful ship, remained at the center of the fleet, its dark silhouette looming over the chaos. Donovan's eyes narrowed as she tracked its movements. This wasn't just another target, it was a symbol. The traitors had built their empire on betrayal and deceit, and now it was time to bring it all crashing down. Humanity would not allow these traitors to walk away. All units, concentrate fire on the flagship, Carter commanded. The human fleet responded in unison, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that pierced the enemy's weakened shields. The flagship's armor buckled under the force, groaning as it began to break apart. The traitors had underestimated humanity's tenacity, and now they were paying the price. But just as victory seemed within reach, the traitors revealed their final weapon, a massive warship, unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. It appeared from the darkness of space, its hull gleaming under the distant stars, like some kind of monstrous predator stalking its prey. The sheer size of the ship was enough to make even the bravest of warriors hesitate. This was no ordinary ship, it was a symbol of the traitors' desperation. They were willing to sacrifice everything to stop humanity from winning. "We've got company," Carter muttered, his voice tense with disbelief. "That ship's a beast. It's almost as big as a small moon." Donovan's eyes widened as she took in the sight of the monstrous warship. The threat was undeniable, but humanity had fought too hard to back down now. They had come this far, and they weren't about to lose. Not now. Not after all they had sacrificed. "Prepare to engage," Donovan said, her voice unwavering. "We've faced worse. We've survived the impossible. We will finish this." The crew's resolve hardened, their focus sharper than ever. The battle had turned in humanity's favor, but it wasn't over yet. With one final, concentrated effort, humanity would either rise victorious or fall. There would be no middle ground. This would be the defining moment in the galaxy's history. As the monstrous warship drew closer, the human fleet surged forward with a renewed determination. This wasn't just about fighting the traitors anymore. This was about proving that humanity would not be ignored, that they would not be broken. The galaxy had seen their strength before, but now they would witness the true power of human will. The first shots were fired, the enemy ship retaliating with a roar of energy blasts. Humanity's fleet surged forward, weaving through the fire, with swift precision, striking with all their might. The battle raged on, but Captain Donovan knew one thing for certain: humanity's fight had only just begun, and they would never stop. The tide of battle had shifted again, and this time, the humans were not retreating. The monstrous warship, the traitors' final weapon, loomed over them, casting a dark shadow that threatened to engulf their fleet. But Captain Donovan's resolve was unwavering. They had fought too hard, sacrificed too much, to let this be the moment they faltered. The odds were staggering, but humanity had never been a species to back down in the face of impossible odds. "Focus all fire on that ship," Donovan's command rang out, sharp and urgent, cutting through the hum of the ship's controls. The crew sprang into action, their hands moving with practiced precision, their eyes fixed on the colossal enemy vessel. This was it. The human fleet had been battered, but it wasn't broken, and they would make sure the galaxy knew it. The traitor fleet, now heavily outnumbered, tried to regroup, but their formations were falling apart. Humanity had shattered their morale. They were no longer the powerful force they once were. Fear had begun to creep into their ranks. But the enemy's final weapon, the behemoth of a ship, had given them new hope. It was powerful, its weapons, capable of turning entire fleets to ashdot. The battle was now a deadly dance. Humanity darting between enemy fire and responding with sharp, precise attacks. The traitor fleet was sluggish, unable to keep up with humanity's speed. Despite their size, their ships lacked the agility of the humans. The enemy's ships took hit after hit, their shields cracking, their engines sputtering, and yet, the massive warship loomed ever closer, its weapons charging for the next devastating strike. On the bridge, Donovan's heart beat faster with every moment that passed. She could feel the weight of the entire mission on her shoulders, but she wasn't alone. Each crew member had their part to play, and their hearts burned with the same fire of end. The war had started because of the traitors' actions, and it would end because of humanity's will. There would be no surrender. "Ready the final assault," Carter said, his voice steady, but tinged with determination. He knew what was at stake. This was humanity's moment to claim their victory. The massive warship was the last obstacle standing between them and total domination over the traitors. If they could take it down, the rest of the enemy fleet would collapse. But it wasn't going to be easy. The crew moved with a sense of urgency now, their every action guided by a singular focus. Their weapons were ready, their shields at maximum. The air inside the ship was thick with anticipation. The massive enemy vessel fired again, its laser beams cutting through the void like deadly beams of light, tearing apart the closest human ships. But humanity wasn't giving up. "All units, concentrate fire on the central core," Donovan shouted, her voice ringing with a fierce edge. The massive warship was heavily armored, but every ship had a weak spot, and the human fleet would find it. They had no choice but to strike now. The final assault would be their last chance to end this war. The human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. The massive warship retaliated, its firepower overwhelming, but humanity's fleet was smaller, faster, and more precise. The enemy's massive ship fired relentlessly, its beams lighting up the dark expanse of space, but the humans dodged, swerved, and hit back even harder. The odds were still against them, but they were determined. The roar of their weapons was deafening, each blast a declaration that humanity would no longer be overlooked, no longer be forgotten. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The human fleet moved as one, a singular force in space, its ships darting and weaving, working together to break the Traitors' defenses. The light from their weapons illuminated the darkness of space, and for a brief instant, it felt as if time itself had stopped. But the ship's massive central core was still intact. The final blow hadn't landed yet. Carter's voice cut through the silence on the bridge. "We're hitting them hard, Captain, but we need one more push. This is it. We take down the core, and the rest of the fleet collapses." Donovan's eyes locked on the viewscreen. She could see the central core of the enemy ship, glowing with a menacing red light. It was their last chance. If they didn't strike now, all of their efforts would be in vain. Humanity's fleet had come so far, sacrificed so much. They couldn't fail now. "Prepare for the final strike," Donovan said, her voice firm. She didn't need to say more. Every crew member knew exactly what had to be done. The human fleet concentrated their fire on the core. It was as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath. The next few moments would determine everything. The massive warship retaliated one last time, its weapons lighting up in a brilliant flash. But the human fleet wasn't slowing down. They pressed on, undeterred, their weapons firing in perfect synchrony. Then, with a deafening roar, the core exploded. A brilliant flash of light lit up space, and the traitor warship began to break apart. First, the shield shattered, and then the entire ship collapsed under the barrage. The explosion sent shockwaves through the surrounding ships, and in that instant, the Traitors' final hope had been destroyed. For a moment, everything fell silent. The human fleet had done it. They had defeated the Traitors' last weapon, the massive warship. The symbol of their power was gone, reduced to debris floating in space. The Traitor fleet, now leaderless and broken, was lost without their central command. But the fight wasn't over. The remaining Traitor ships, though crippled, fought on in a desperate attempt to hold their ground. But they were no match for humanity's resolve. One by one, the enemy ships fell. The Traitors' reign was coming to an end. Donovan watched the remnants of the battle unfold on the screen, her heart heavy with the weight of their victory. They had fought hard, lost many, but in the end, they had won. Humanity had proven to the galaxy that they could be ignored no longer. They had taken back what was theirs, and no one would forget the strength of their will. The galaxy would remember humanity, now and forever. The destruction of the Traitors' warship had sent shockwaves through both the battlefield and the hearts of the human fleet. The enormous, imposing vessel that had once seemed like an unstoppable force was now just a smoldering wreck floating in the emptiness of space. Yet, as the debris scattered across the void, it was clear that this victory was only the beginning of the end. The enemy's fleet was still out there, scattered but not yet broken, and humanity's forces were far from safe. The galaxy was watching. They were waiting for humanity to finish what they had started. Captain Donovan stood in the heart of the bridge, her hands steady on the controls, though the weight of the moment pressed heavily on her chest. The space around them was silent now, save for the crackling of static in the communications channels, the eerie quiet of a war-torn battlefield. The flashing lights of damaged ships and broken debris painted a surreal picture across the void. The fight was far from over, but humanity had just made the first step towards victory. They had taken down the core of the Traitors' power, but there was still work to be done. "We've made a dent, Captain." Carter's voice broke through the silence, his tone a mix of relief and cautious optimism. "But they're still regrouping. We haven't finished them off yet." Donovan's gaze never left the screen, but she nodded, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the remnants of the Traitor fleet. The scattered ships that remained were desperately trying to reorganize, but it was clear that they were shaken. They had lost their flagship, their symbol of strength. and now they were vulnerable. But the humans could not afford to underestimate them. "They're cornered, Carter," she said, her voice steady and cold. "And when you corner a wild animal, it will fight back with everything it has." Her words hung in the air, the crew absorbing the gravity of the situation. This was not just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future of humanity. A fight to ensure that their betrayal would not go unpunished, that their presence in the galaxy would be respected and feared. Communications officer spoke up, pulling everyone's attention back to the matter at hand. "Captain, we've detected another wave of enemy reinforcements. It's another large fleet, but this time, they're coming from the far side of the system. They've learned from their mistakes and are coming at us with full force." The traitors were not giving up. They were desperate, but they were not weak, and that was exactly why humanity had to finish this once and for all. "How long until they reach us?" Donovan asked, her mind already racing through strategies, her heart set on one goal: victory. "About 5 minutes, Captain," the officer replied, "but we've already lost valuable time. If we don't act quickly, they'll overwhelm us." Donovan's thoughts raced. They couldn't wait for reinforcements. Humanity had been given a chance, but there was no guarantee it would last. If they were to secure their place in the galaxy, they needed to act now. They had to make the enemy pay for every betrayal, every wound they had inflicted on humanity. "Prepare for a final assault," Donovan ordered. Her voice was hard, a reflection of the cold resolve inside her. "We take the fight to them. All units spread out and converge on the new fleet. We hit them fast, hit them hard, and take no prisoners." The crew reacted swiftly, their movements sharp and precise, no hesitation in their steps. They were ready. The moment for revenge had arrived, and they would not back down. The human fleet began to advance, the ships moving in perfect synchronization. Each ship's weapon systems powered up, ready for the onslaught ahead. The space around them seemed to pulse with energy, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the engines and the growing tension in the air. The crew knew that this battle could decide everything. One wrong move, one slip-up, and humanity could lose everything. They had no choice but to win. As the two fleets drew closer, the first shots rang out. The deep hum of weapons firing filling the empty space. Explosions lit up the void as the traitor ships returned fire, their weapons targeting the human fleet with deadly precision. The battle was chaos, an intricate dance of lasers and explosions, each ship moving with purpose. Every shot fired a potential game-changer. The human fleet retaliated, firing back with deadly force, targeting the enemy's weak points. The traitor ships tried to regroup, to reorganize, but it was too late. Humanity was moving too fast, too decisively. They hit the enemy's lines, punching through the defenses and tearing apart their ships. The human fleet had the upper hand now, and they weren't going to let up. Every traitor ship that fell was another victory, another step closer to making the galaxy remember who they were. But just as victory seemed within reach, the traitor fleet revealed its trump card: a massive, heavily armored vessel, unlike anything humanity had seen before. It emerged from the depths of space like a dark predator, its weapons powering up, its shields glowing with a menacing light. "Brace yourselves," Carter shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "This is their last-ditch effort. We can't let them get close." The enemy ship fired, and the impact was felt across the human fleet. The shockwave from the explosion rattled every ship, throwing them off course. Shields flickered, and for a moment, the human fleet was thrown into chaos. But Donovan's resolve never wavered. "Stay focused," she commanded. "All units, concentrate fire on that vessel. This ends now." The crew responded with unflinching discipline, their hands steady as they fired back with everything they had. The massive enemy vessel loomed before them, its firepower immense, but it wasn't invincible. The human fleet's precision and speed were their greatest strengths, and as the two forces clashed, the battle reached its peak. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The darkness of space lit up with the flash of explosions, the silence broken by the roar of weapons. But in the end, humanity's will proved stronger. With one final, devastating blow, the massive enemy ship was obliterated, its pieces floating like the remnants of a nightmare. The traitors' fleet had finally been shattered, as the remnants of the battle scattered across space. Donovan let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They had done it. The traitors had been vanquished. Humanity had struck back, and this time, they had won. The galaxy would remember humanity not as the underdog, not as the forgotten species, but as a force to be reckoned with. The human fleet, battered but victorious, began to regroup. Their mission was complete. The traitors' empire had crumbled, and humanity had made sure the galaxy would never forget. The silence that followed the final explosion of the Traitors' fleet was almost deafening. It wasn't the kind of silence that came after a calm victory, but the heavy, weighty quiet that follows a battle fought and won. The stars above, once witnesses to the chaos, now seemed to stand still. The vastness of space offering no answers, only the cold, unyielding truth that humanity had triumphed. Captain Donovan stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes locked on the viewscreen. The wreckage of the enemy fleet floated in the void, an eerie testament to the violence that had just unfolded. For a long moment, there was no sound, no words, just the quiet hum of the ship's systems, the steady pulse of the human fleet in the aftermath of victory. But as the crew began to breathe again, as the adrenaline that had kept them moving through the battle slowly faded, the enormity of what had been accomplished started to sink in. They had done it. They had defeated the Traitors. The galaxy would remember humanity, not as the lost and broken species, but as the fierce force that had struck back. No one would underestimate them. Again, Donovan could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. It was a strange, bittersweet feeling. The cost of this victory had been high. There were lives lost, comrades who wouldn't be returning home. But humanity had not just survived. They had shown the galaxy the power of their will, the strength of their resolve. It was a message that would echo across the stars, and one that could not be ignored. We've won. Carter's voice broke the silence, his tone soft, almost in disbelief. But at what cost? Donovan turned to face her second-in-command, her eyes still hard, still sharp, but with a sadness lurking behind them. The question had been on her mind too, though she had kept it locked away. Victory was always costly in war, but some victories left more scars than others, and this one, as sweet as it felt, was no different. The cost is always high, Donovan replied, her voice steady. But the galaxy knows now. Humanity will never be forgotten, and no one will dare cross us again. Carter nodded, though. His gaze drifted to the wreckage outside the window. What now? He asked. What do we do with the galaxy at our feet? Donovan thought about that for a moment, feeling the weight of the question. What came next? What was the purpose of this victory? Revenge had been served, but now there was a bigger question. What would humanity do with its newfound power? We rebuild, she said quietly, and we lead. We've earned our place in the galaxy. We show them that we will not be ruled, that we are not pawns to be played with. We will take what is ours. The crew fell silent again, each person, deep in thought, processing the enormity of the battle and the implications of their victory. Humanity had been pushed to the brink. They had been made to feel small, insignificant, and powerless. But now, as the debris of the enemy ships floated in space, humanity had made its mark. They had reminded the galaxy that they were not to be ignored, not to be underestimated. This war had not just been about revenge, it had been about showing the universe that humanity had strength, determination, and a fierce will to survive. They were no longer the underdog. They were a force to be reckoned with. The ship's intercom crackled, and the voice of the communications officer came through. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They want to speak with you. Donovan's brow furrowed. The Galactic Council was an organization that represented the most powerful factions in the galaxy. They had been silent during the war, watching from afar as humanity fought for its survival. Now, with the traitor fleet destroyed and humanity standing victorious, they were finally taking notice. Patch it through, Donovan ordered. The screen flickered to life, and the faces of the Galactic Council appeared on the viewscreen. They were a mix of alien species, their expressions solemn, yet their eyes fixed on Donovan with a certain level of respect. The leader of the council, a tall silver-skinned alien with sharp features, spoke first. Captain Donovan, the council leader said, his voice rich and deep. It seems humanity has once again proven itself. The galaxy has been watching, and we must now acknowledge your strength. The traitors you fought are no more, and we see that your people are a force to be reckoned with. Donovan stood tall, her gaze unwavering as she met the council's eyes. I didn't fight for recognition, she replied. I fought for our survival. We were betrayed, but we will never forget what was done to us. And now we will shape our own future. The council leader nodded, a slow, respectful movement. We recognize that, and we also recognize that humanity is no longer a species to be overlooked. The galaxy must adjust to this new reality. You have earned your place. For the first time in her life, Donovan felt the weight of those words. They were not just words of respect, they were words of power. The galaxy had seen humanity as weak, as nothing more than a footnote in the grand scheme of things. But now, the tables had turned. Humanity was no longer the prey. They were the hunters. The transmission ended, and the crew let out a collective breath. The battle was over. The traitors were gone, and humanity's place in the galaxy was secure. But as Donovan looked out at the stars, she knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there would be more challenges ahead. Humanity had earned its place, but it was up to them to hold on to it. They had proven their strength. Now they would prove their wisdom. With the traitors gone and the galaxy watching, humanity was free to shape its destiny. And Donovan, with her crew by her side, was ready to lead them into a new era, one where the galaxy would remember the strength, the will, and the indomitable spirit of humanity.